9 interceptions changed everything. 9 interceptions in 12 days. 0 turnovers on the other side. And suddenly, what was supposed to be a competitive quarterback battle in Cleveland may be turning into something much harder for the Browns to explain. Deshaun Watson entered camp with almost every advantage a veteran quarterback could ask for. First-team reps. The starting offensive line. Better receiving options. And access to the full offensive package. But according to the practice numbers highlighted in the original report, those advantages haven't translated into clean football. Instead, Watson's turnover total has continued to climb, with 9 interceptions across 12 practices, becoming the number nobody around this quarterback room can ignore. Then there is Shedeur Sanders. While working primarily with the second-team offense and receiving fewer opportunities, Sanders has reportedly gone through the same stretch without throwing an interception. And that contrast matters, because this isn't simply about one spectacular throw or one impressive afternoon. It's about consistency, decision-making, ball security, and what happens when one quarterback keeps protecting possessions while the other repeatedly gives them away. Yes, this is training camp. Quarterbacks experiment. Coaches install new concepts. Defenses see the same offense every day and begin recognizing tendencies. But that explanation works only for so long. When mistakes become repetitive, the conversation changes from isolated errors to patterns, and patterns are exactly what coaching staffs are supposed to evaluate. That is why the pressure is now moving beyond Watson and Sanders. It is moving directly toward Kevin Stefanski and the Browns' decision makers. Because if the players inside that locker room are watching the same practices, seeing the same throws, and studying the same tape, eventually the depth chart has to reflect what is happening on the field, or Cleveland will have to explain why it doesn't. And the most dangerous part for Watson may be that Sanders isn't trying to win this competition with highlight reel chaos. He's doing it through timing, anticipation, discipline, and protecting the football. The rookie is making the argument quietly, one possession at a time. So now Cleveland faces a question that could define its entire season. What happens if the quarterback with less money, fewer first-team opportunities, and fewer advantages simply keeps playing better? Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments. If you believe Cleveland should let performance decide this quarterback battle, if you believe the Browns should stay patient with Watson and give the veteran more time, do. And subscribe to the channel for more NFL stories as this quarterback battle develops. Why these practice turnovers matter more than people think. There is one argument Cleveland fans are going to hear every time Deshaun Watson's interception total gets mentioned. It's only practice, and normally, that would be a fair response. Training camp is where quarterbacks test windows, experiment with timing, and make mistakes while learning an offense. But 9 interceptions across 12 practices forces you to look deeper than a single ugly rep. The important part is repetition. Cleveland's defense sees this offense every day. They know the formations, they recognize the route combinations, they understand Watson's cadence, his release point, and where he wants to go when pressure arrives. That familiarity absolutely gives the defense an advantage, but it also means the quarterback has the same opportunity to adjust. He sees those defenders every day too. He knows their tendencies. He gets repeated chances to correct the exact mistakes that showed up yesterday. That is why a pattern matters. One interception can come from a receiver slipping, another can come from a tipped football. A third can come from a quarterback intentionally challenging a tight window because coaches want to see whether the throw is possible. But when turnovers continue appearing over nearly 2 weeks, the question changes. Is the quarterback learning from the previous rep? Is he processing coverage quickly enough? Is he protecting the football when the play breaks down? The original practice account also adds another concern. The problems were not limited to interceptions. Watson reportedly dealt with a strip sack and a batted pass as well. Those moments raise separate questions about pocket awareness, protection communication, and whether defenders are beginning to recognize his timing. Again, none of that proves a quarterback cannot recover. Training camp is designed for correction, but a veteran competing for the starting job is not being evaluated only on arm talent. He is being evaluated on command. And that is what makes the comparison with Shedeur Sanders so uncomfortable. While Watson's mistakes were accumulating, Sanders was reportedly protecting the football with fewer first-team advantages. Once that contrast exists for multiple practices, coaches cannot simply erase it because one player entered camp with a stronger resume. At some point, its only practice stops being an explanation. It becomes the exact place where the decision is supposed to be made. Watson has the advantages, so why isn't he separating? If this quarterback competition were truly even, Deshaun Watson should have been the player pulling away. He entered the battle with NFL experience, first-team opportunities, stronger surrounding personnel, and the familiarity that comes with being the veteran in the room. According to the original account, Watson had the starting offensive line, better receiving options, and more complete access to the offense. Those are not small advantages. They are exactly the advantages that should help an experienced quarterback create separation from a rookie. Instead, the opposite storyline started gaining momentum. Watson's interceptions kept rising while Shedeur Sanders continued protecting the ball. That does not automatically mean every Sanders rep was better. It does not mean every Watson turnover was entirely his fault. But when one quarterback receives more support and still creates more negative plays, the burden of explanation shifts. The veteran is supposed to make the offense calmer. He is supposed to recognize pressure before the snap, communicate protection, understand where the safe throw is, and know when a play is dead. Those are the areas where experience should matter most. Arm strength can be compared, athleticism can be debated, but command of an NFL offense is supposed to be the veteran's biggest advantage. That is why the strip sack described in the practice report is so revealing. If the same defender keeps winning a matchup and eventually reaches the quarterback with enough force to knock the ball free, someone has to adjust. The protection can change. The ball can come out faster. The quarterback can alter the launch point. The offense has options. When the same problem keeps appearing, coaches start asking whether the issue is execution or recognition. And Watson cannot hide from that question behind his contract or past accomplishments. A depth chart is supposed to represent who gives the team the best chance. Now, that word now is everything. Cleveland is not choosing between the peak version of Watson from years ago and a rookie. It is choosing between the quarterbacks standing on this practice field today. One carries the experience, the other is creating the cleaner turnover profile. If Watson wants to end this competition, the solution is simple but difficult. Start stacking clean practices. Protect the football. Control the offense. Make the gap obvious. Because every day that he fails to do that gives Sanders another opportunity to turn what was supposed to be a veteran advantage into a rookie opening. Shedeur Sanders is making the most of less. What makes Shedeur Sanders' side of this story compelling is not simply the zero in the interception column, it is the environment around that zero. According to the source account, Sanders was working primarily with second-team personnel, receiving fewer premium reps and dealing with a bandaged throwing hand. Yet he still produced a 1-7 for 2-5 practice without a turnover. That matters because a backup quarterback does not always receive the same margin for error as the presumed starter. The timing can be different, receiver chemistry can be less developed, protection may be less consistent, the play package can be more limited. Those disadvantages normally make clean football harder. Sanders reportedly responded by simplifying the job instead of forcing it. The most encouraging plays described in the original material were not reckless bombs designed to create headlines. They were rhythm throws, anticipation throws, and completions that required him to trust where the receiver would be before the window fully. That is quarterbacking that translates beyond a highlight reel. A crossing route is a perfect example. The quarterback cannot wait until the receiver is clearly open. If he waits, the defender closes the window. The ball has to leave early, based on timing and trust. That requires the quarterback's feet, eyes, and understanding of the concept to work together. That is where Sanders appears to be building his case. Not by trying to embarrass Watson, not by publicly declaring himself the starter, by showing that he can operate within structure, and the throwing hand issue adds another layer. Any discomfort in the hand used to grip and release the football can affect touch, spin, and accuracy. Yet the practice described in the source still ended without a turnover. That does not make Sanders flawless. It does not guarantee preseason success. It certainly does not mean training camp statistics alone should determine the season, but it does remove one of the easiest arguments against him. Cleveland cannot say the rookie looks good only because the conditions are favorable. The conditions described in the report were actually less favorable than Watson's. That turns the competition upside down. The veteran has the resources and is being asked to prove he can maximize them. The rookie has fewer resources and is being asked to prove he can survive them. Right now, according to the pattern described in camp, Sanders is doing more than surviving. He is forcing the Browns to keep watching. The interview may have helped Shedeur as much as the practice. Quarterback competitions are not won only between the lines. The starter becomes the face of the offense. He speaks after losses. He answers uncomfortable questions. He manages teammates, expectations, criticism, and pressure that can shift every week. That is why Shedeur Sanders' post-practice interview mattered almost as much as the stat sheet. The original account described a rookie who emphasized structure, discipline, and sacrifice. Sanders reportedly talked about organizing his day carefully, managing sleep, recovery, film study, and outside distractions. Those answers may sound simple, but they reveal what coaches want from a young quarterback. Routine. Talent gets a player drafted. Routine gives him a chance to survive the NFL. Even more revealing was how Sanders handled a question involving Watson. The framing could have pushed him toward one of two bad outcomes. He could publicly praise Watson in a way that weakened his own position, or he could criticize the veteran and create a locker room story that had nothing to do with football. He chose neither. According to the source, Sanders avoided creating conflict and did not allow the question to turn into a personal rivalry. That is exactly what Cleveland needs if this competition becomes more intense. Because the worst possible scenario for the Browns is not merely choosing the wrong quarterback, it is allowing the battle to split the room. Sanders appears to understand that he can compete aggressively without attacking the other quarterback. He can believe he deserves the job without saying Watson does not. Those two ideas can exist together. That kind of restraint becomes even more valuable when a young player is surrounded by attention. Shedeur carries a famous name. Every quote can become a headline. Every facial expression can be interpreted as drama. The temptation to respond emotionally is always there. Instead, the version described in the interview sounded controlled. And that matters because quarterbacks are judged on emotional management too. A player who protects the football but creates chaos around himself can still become a problem. A player who protects the football and protects the locker room becomes much harder to dismiss. This is where Sanders' case starts extending beyond practice statistics. The coaches are evaluating the throws. The front office is evaluating the future. The locker room is evaluating whether the quarterback acts like someone worth following. And if Sanders continues showing maturity off the field while producing clean football on it, Cleveland's decision becomes increasingly difficult to postpone. The media is starting to say what Cleveland won't. Sports media usually loves uncertainty. A quarterback battle gives television shows weeks of debate. Analysts can argue both sides. Reporters can hedge. Nobody has to make a definitive prediction until the coaching staff finally announces the starter. That is why the shift described in the original story is important. Multiple media voices reportedly began reaching the same basic conclusion. Shedeur Sanders had created the stronger camp case, not because every analyst suddenly became a Sanders supporter, not because one spectacular highlight changed the conversation. The argument was that repeated practice evidence had started making neutrality harder to defend. One criticism focused on coaching credibility. If players inside the building see one quarterback outperforming another, how long can a staff continue calling the competition completely open without losing credibility? Another description reportedly characterized Watson as diminished compared with the player people remember from earlier in his career. A third voice went even further, suggesting the competition had effectively already tilted toward Sanders. Those are strong conclusions, and they should still be treated as analysis rather than official team decisions. Kevin Stefanski and his staff have access to information outsiders do not. Coaches grade protections, reads, footwork, situational decisions, and assignments that may never show up in a practice stat line, but media consensus can still create pressure. Once reporters stop asking who is winning and start asking why hasn't Cleveland acknowledged who is winning, the organization faces a different kind of scrutiny, and the locker room matters even more than television. Players know which quarterback gets the offense into the correct protection. They know who repeatedly puts them in good positions. They see interceptions, missed reads, strong throws, and command in the huddle with far more detail than the public does. If the players begin believing the performance gap is obvious, the coaching staff cannot ignore that perception forever. Football teams depend on merit. Every backup is told to earn his opportunity. Every veteran is told nothing is guaranteed. Every young player is told the best man will play. A quarterback competition tests whether those statements are real. If Cleveland eventually chooses Watson, the Browns need football reasons strong enough for the locker room to understand. If they choose Sanders, they will be acknowledging that draft position, experience, and money could not outweigh current performance. Either way, the media conversation is no longer simply surrounding this battle. It is accelerating it. Kevin Stefanski's credibility is quietly entering the competition. The most important person in Cleveland's quarterback battle may eventually be neither Deshaun Watson nor Shedeur Sanders. It may be Kevin Stefanski. A head coach can survive a quarterback making mistakes. What becomes more dangerous is losing the belief of his own locker room. Players need to trust that performance matters. Accountability applies equally. And the depth chart is built around winning rather than protecting reputations. That is why every practice rep carries more weight. As this competition continues, if Watson clearly earns the job, Stefanski can point to experience, and performance and move forward. If Sanders clearly earns it, the coach can reward the rookie and send a powerful message about merit. The difficult scenario comes when the evidence begins leaning one way while the organization behaves as if nothing has changed. Players notice. A receiver knows which quarterback delivers the ball on time. An offensive lineman knows which quarterback identifies pressure correctly. A running back knows which quarterback puts the offense in the right look. Defensive players watch interceptions happen from the other side. Nobody inside an NFL building needs social media to tell them who is playing well. The source material argues that this is where leadership becomes the real issue. If the locker room believes Sanders is outperforming Watson while first-team opportunities continue leaning toward the veteran, players may begin wondering whether contract status matters more than practice performance. That perception is dangerous even if it is not true. Once players believe the system is not merit-based, every other personnel decision becomes harder to sell. Why should a backup linebacker believe he can earn more snaps? Why should a young receiver believe a strong week of practice will change his role? The quarterback decision becomes a symbol for the entire roster. This does not mean Stefanski should react emotionally or make a starter announcement because analysts demand it. Coaches need patience. One preseason game can reveal weaknesses hidden during practice. A veteran may handle live pressure better. A rookie may struggle when the defensive looks become unfamiliar. But patience needs a purpose. If the competition remains open because coaches genuinely need more information, that is responsible evaluation. If it remains open only because the final answer is uncomfortable, that becomes something else. And that is the line Stefanski may soon have to navigate. The Browns do not merely need the quarterback with the better story. They need the quarterback who gives the offense the best chance to win, because once the regular season begins, there are no more practice explanations. There is only the scoreboard. The contract is the shadow hanging over everything. Every quarterback competition is supposed to be about football. This one cannot escape the money. Deshaun Watson's relationship with Cleveland is tied to one of the most complicated financial commitments in recent NFL history, and that creates an unavoidable question every time the Browns evaluate the position. Can an organization truly ignore what it has already invested? The original script frames that financial reality as the biggest reason Cleveland might hesitate to make an obvious change. That interpretation is impossible to prove from the outside, but the pressure itself is real. Organizations do not make massive commitments casually. Executives attach plans, timelines, roster decisions, and future cap management to those commitments. When the player at the center of the plan struggles, changing direction is not just a depth chart move. It becomes an admission that the plan may need to be rebuilt. That is why teams often give veterans more time. They want more evidence. They want the preseason game, then another practice, then another evaluation. Sometimes patience is justified. Experienced quarterbacks have earned the benefit of a larger sample size, but there is also a danger called sunk cost thinking, allowing what has already been spent to influence a decision about what gives the team the best chance tomorrow. The money cannot complete a third down throw. The contract cannot protect the football. The past investment cannot read a blitz. Only the quarterback on the field can do those things. That is why Sanders creates such an uncomfortable comparison. If a younger, cheaper player continues producing cleaner football, Cleveland's financial commitment to Watson stops functioning as an argument for who should start. It becomes an organizational problem that must be managed separately. The football decision should still be football. Who moves the offense? Who protects possession? Who commands the huddle? Who gives Cleveland the better chance to win? If Watson answers those questions positively during live action, he can change the direction of this story quickly. That is what preseason is for. But if Sanders continues playing efficiently, every additional delay becomes harder to explain without people pointing toward the contract. And that is where this becomes bigger than two quarterbacks. Cleveland is being forced to decide what kind of organization it wants to be. One that protects a previous investment for as long as possible, or one willing to acknowledge new information and change course when performance demands it? That is not an easy decision. But successful franchises are usually defined less by avoiding mistakes than by how quickly they recognize when circumstances have changed. The preseason game could turn the debate into a decision. Training camp created the argument. The preseason could force the answer. Everything changes when the quarterback competition moves from a controlled practice field into a stadium against another defense. The Browns can script situations in camp. Coaches can repeat a concept. Quarterbacks understand the tendencies of teammates they have faced for weeks. Against another team, the picture becomes less familiar. That is why the upcoming preseason test is so important. The first thing to watch is not even the stat line. It is who receives meaningful opportunities, which quarterback gets the earlier series, which one works with better personnel. How long does each player stay on the field? Rep distribution can reveal how the coaching staff truly views the competition before anyone announces a winner. Then comes processing. Can Shedeur Sanders maintain the rhythm and anticipation he reportedly showed in camp when the defense across from him has different tendencies? Can he recognize pressure he has not seen every day? Can he keep protecting the football when the pocket becomes less predictable? That is the next step in proving the practice success is real. Watson faces a different challenge. The veteran needs clean football more than spectacular football. He does not need to throw 4 touchdowns in August. He needs to look controlled, make the correct reads, avoid unnecessary risk, handle pressure, remind the Browns why experience was supposed to be his advantage. One strong preseason outing would not erase 12 days of camp concerns. Just as one poor Sanders series would not erase everything he has done well, but live reps can change momentum. If Sanders plays efficiently, and Watson continues turning the ball over, Cleveland's room for ambiguity becomes extremely small. At that point, the Browns would not only be comparing practice reports, they would have live game evidence pointing in the same direction. If Watson looks dramatically sharper, the organization gains a legitimate reason to extend the evaluation. That would not necessarily mean he has won the job. It would mean the veteran has finally produced the type of evidence needed to keep the competition alive. And this is where Cleveland must be careful. A preseason game should be information, not theater. The Browns cannot manipulate the evaluation simply to produce the answer that creates the least financial embarrassment. The goal is not to prove the front office was right years ago. The goal is to identify the quarterback who can win games now. After weeks of interceptions, clean rookie reps, media pressure, and growing questions about organizational credibility, the competition is approaching the moment where narratives stop mattering. Soon the Browns will have to put someone behind center, and when they do, every player in that locker room will understand exactly what the decision says about what Cleveland values: performance, money, and the decision Cleveland can't avoid. At some point, every quarterback competition stops being about potential and becomes about trust. That is where Cleveland appears to be heading now. For nearly 2 weeks, the story described in the source has followed the same basic pattern: Deshaun Watson receiving the stronger structural advantages, Shedeur Sanders working with fewer of them, and the cleaner football repeatedly coming from the rookie side of the competition. The numbers alone do not tell the entire story, but they have created a question the Browns can no longer avoid forever. What matters more, the investment already made, or the performance happening right now? Strategically, Cleveland has to separate those two issues. Watson's contract is a financial reality. It affects planning, salary cap decisions, and the organization's long-term flexibility, but the starting quarterback decision should still be judged on football. If one player consistently protects the ball, controls the offense, and earns the confidence of the locker room, that has to matter more than what was spent in the past. That does not mean Watson should be humiliated or pushed aside without a fair evaluation. Veterans deserve respect, and one difficult stretch should not erase an entire career. But respect is not the same as guaranteed playing time. If the competition is real, then both quarterbacks have to be measured by the same standard. For Shedeur Sanders, the lesson is equally important. Winning a job in August is not the same as proving you can carry an NFL offense for an entire season. The maturity, disciplina, timing, and ball security described in the source are encouraging, but the real challenge comes when defenses disguise coverage, protection breaks down, and mistakes become public. That is why the preseason matters. Cleveland does not need drama. It needs clarity. Kevin Stefanski and the coaching staff have to make a decision that the locker room can understand. If Watson earns the job, the football reasons should be obvious. If Sanders earns it, the organization should not be afraid to acknowledge that performance changed the original plan. That kind of accountability can strengthen a team. Players notice when merit matters. They notice when coaches reward improvement. They also notice when financial commitments seem to outweigh what happens on the field. The healthiest outcome is not one where Watson is attacked or Sanders is crowned before he has earned anything in live games. The healthiest outcome is one where both quarterbacks are evaluated honestly, treated professionally, and allowed to let performance decide the next step. Because contracts can shape a roster, reputations can shape expectations, but eventually, the football still has to be played. So what would you do if you were making the call in Cleveland? Comment 1 if you believe Shedeur Sanders should earn the starting job if his clean play continues. Comment 2 if you believe the Browns should give Deshaun Watson more time to prove himself in live action. Keep the debate respectful. Tell us where you are watching from. And if you want more deep NFL breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with another football fan.